Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wisdom Wednesday for this week. So here on our Wisdom Wednesday, remember, this is just a generalized spiritual discussion based on the energies that we are working with for this week. And I thought that with the energies for this week and with this, fabulous eclipse that we are currently moving through, this eclipse corridor, that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to look at this beautiful Rumi quote that is just such a light for us and gives us such illumination. And so for today, that's really what we're going to be touching on. We're going to be looking at this Rumi quote that says, "The wound is the place where the light enters." So we're going to be talking about wounds. We're going to be talking about what is the light entering? What does that mean? And we're going to be talking about why we don't necessarily always want to let go of our wounds, or why sometimes our wounds are still sticking around. And it seems like, we're doing all this work, but nothing really seems to be happening. So we're going to be talking about all of that tonight. And again, this is just a generalized spiritual discussion. If a question or comment does arise based on the topic that we're talking about, then feel free to put it in the comments. And if not, that's absolutely fine. And remember, you can always catch the replay of this either here on my page, or you can go over to my YouTube channel as well, and you'll be able to see all the replays of the Wisdom Wednesdays that we have had thus far. So let's dive into our topic for tonight, which is all about this Rumi quote. In the first place, we're going to start on what is a wound. Now, again, this is just my way of looking at it. Why, hello, thanks for joining, thanks for being here. So we're just going to be looking at it. I'm just going to give you my view on what is a wound. When we get wounded, all that really has happened is we have put ourselves into the thought system of the ego. Now, before we go any further with that, what is the ego? The ego is not good. The ego is not bad. The ego is not a force. The ego doesn't have any power. The ego is nothing more than the thought that you could be separate from spirit. That's all that the ego is. It is the thought that you could be separate from spirit. And so the wound comes when we have identified ourselves with what we could call this self that we have made that is small and finite. That's really where the wound comes from, because we have identified ourselves with this idea that we could be changed, that we could be changed in any way, shape, or form. This isn't to say that we haven't gone through some of those experiences. Not at all. It's just simply to come to the acknowledgement, the recognition that, hey, this is all that the wound is. And so that's what we can start to look at. The wound is simply when we have identified ourselves with the ego thought system. The ego thought system is what? The idea of separation. That's it. So now that we know what a wound is, let's talk about what is the light. And all the light is your true self. That's what the light is. It is your awareness. It is your consciousness. And that's what, when we do quote unquote shadow work, all we're really doing is we are removing the blocks that we have put in the way of the light of who we are. That's it. That's all shadow work really is. It's just removing the blocks so the light of who you are can truly shine through you on a consistent basis. That's it. It's very, very simple. Now, it doesn't mean that the shadows aren't going to seem like they're big and scary and awful and terrible and oh my God, they're just so big. It doesn't mean that. It just means that if we can look at it from this higher perspective of okay, all that has happened here is I have identified myself with a thought system that has put a block to the truth of who I am in the way. That's it. Like that's all that it takes. It's very simple. And most of the time when things are simple, what happens is we tend to drift away from them. Well, it's too simple, so it can't be that easy. It actually is that easy if we're willing to come to that acknowledgement and that recognition. So now we know what the wound is. Now we know what the light is. Now we actually also have another further definition of the shadow, which is what we have placed in the way of who we are, of the truth of who we are. That's it. Nothing more. And so now let's start to talk about a little bit about why we keep our wounds. And so for me, there are, I would say, probably 4 different reasons why we keep our wounds. So way number 1, the reason that we keep our wound is because we just push it down and we're just like, I'm not going to deal with it. And so it becomes what we could say kind of trapped energy. And so since it wasn't expressed, we just kind of repressed it. We pushed it down and said, I'm not dealing with this. I don't have time for it. And so it kind of just becomes a stuck energy pattern in our own system. And so then let's say that someone, comes up and it is a very similar situation to what you repressed and never really expressed. Guess what? That energy then sees an opportunity because it's been triggered now. So it's kind of just going in a little circle, very slow, not very active. And then all of a sudden someone or some situation happens and that energy gets triggered. And so it starts spinning because it's like, okay, I want to get out. I want to get out. I want to get out. But then what tends to happen is, again, we repress it instead of expressing it, instead of really talking about it in whatever way, shape, or form that works for you. So that's one reason. That's one way in which we keep our wounds in place. We just constantly keep repressing it and not letting it to be expressed. The second way that we keep our wounds is because we tend to venerate them. We tend to be like, oh, I am my wound. This is who I am now. I have now placed this wound as a part of who I am. And so now I am placing value on this wound and saying, yeah, this aspect of me is very valuable to me, or this story is very valuable to me. So I'm not going to let it go. I am now going to venerate it. I'm now going to give it all this power. So now you have disempowered the truth of who you are in order to play this game, if you will, of I am my wound and I cannot move forward. So we tend to venerate it and we're like, oh, I am my wound, or this wound is so big. This wound is so deep. This wound is so this wound has gone on for centuries. This is a past life. Wonderful and great. But what are you doing? You're making the wound seem like it has a life of its own, like it's more powerful, and all of these things. So you're disempowering yourself, which is not what we want to do. We want to instead, we acknowledge what occurred, and then we're willing to let go of the story. But oftentimes we don't let go of that story. We keep the story, we venerate the story, and we're venerating that pain and being like, well, I just have to be in this pain. And we don't realize we're doing it on a conscious level. Sometimes, other times we do know we're doing it on a conscious level. It just kind of depends. And if we're going to venerate that pain, if we're going to stay in that pain, then we have to sit with it. And we're just going to have to, because we're choosing to sit with it. We're choosing to be in it. So that's the second way that we kind of keep our wounds stuck, by venerating it, making it who we are, venerating the story and being like, well, this is just my life and there's nothing I can do about it. Then we come to the third way in which we keep our wounds. And this is what I like to call the hiding of the wound. And so the best way that I can explain it is, let's say that I have a little cut on my finger. It's bleeding a lot. And so I, cover it with my hand to stop the bleeding. And then I come up to you and I'm like, hey, Karen, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So, then I come up to you and I'm like, hey, can you go ahead and put a Band-Aid on this? And you're like, put a Band-Aid on what? Well, this cut that I have. Can you put a Band-Aid on that, please? And you would be like, sure, I'll put a Band-Aid on that for you. No problem. Not an issue. I just need you, to move your hand. No. Just put the Band-Aid on. No, just go ahead. And, so it's this argument of, no, just put the Band-Aid on. And so the light of awareness, we can say, kind of might shine on a little bit of that wound. And we might be willing to maybe let our thumb up instead of holding it down. We might be like, okay. And then maybe, slowly but surely we let our fingers up. And maybe we let all of our fingers up, but we're still hiding that wound. And so we have to be willing to take the hand away so that the light, the truth of who we are, can, see it. So that's another way that we kind of keep our wounds, is we keep on being like, I want to heal it, but we're not letting ourselves get to the core of the issue. We're kind of dancing around it. We're taking finger by finger by finger by finger by finger. And if that's what you want to do, absolutely fine. But just know that you can get to the core of that issue. You don't have to go finger by finger by finger by finger and then take away the hand to see the core. You can get to the core. Okay? And then the fourth way that we deal with trauma or deal with our wounds, other than the repression or the veneration or the hiding it, is the last way that we tend to deal with the wound seems to be the most insidious. And the way that we try to deal with the wound is we try to get others to fix us. We say, I'm broken, fix me. And then we're asking everyone else for advice. And yet we're not taking any of the advice. We're just like, well, yeah, I'd really like to heal this. Like, I'd really like to. But, I don't have time to sit in meditation. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. That's just another way that we keep the wound. And that's why it's the most insidious way, because we're saying we want to heal it and we're asking for the advice, but then we're taking a step back and we're being like, well, that advice is great and all, but the moment that a but, perhaps, a maybe comes up, you can be guaranteed the ego thought system, you're focusing on that. You're valuing that more than you're valuing the healing. And once again, this is not to judge yourself. This is not to be like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. We all do it. We've all done it in one way, shape, form, or another. And so this is where we can begin this healing process, because healing, we know, is an inside job. And of course, we can ask for help. But as we're asking for that help, we have to be willing to take the actions that we were given. It can't just be, I want your help, and then that's it, it's gone. No, I want your help, so I'm going to take the consistent steps to get to that help in whatever way, shape, or form. And so I want to provide you with just some things that I have learned along the way when it does come to dealing with these wounds that may arise. And if they rise up, here's one thing that we have a tendency to do when a wound rises up. Oh God, this again. And we get very sarcastic about it, or we get very judgmental of ourselves. Like, why am I still carrying this? Why is this still here? Why am I still seeing this? Instead, what we can attempt to do is to be grateful. And I know that sounds very strange. Like, why would I be grateful if this wound is coming up? Well, life is always unfolding for your benefit, which means that life is always unfolding for you to show you the rocks or the wounds that you are still carrying around in your pocket that are stopping the light of who you are from truly shining. And so we can be grateful that this event is happening, because it is showing us what we are still carrying around, what wound is being activated. And so we can be like, oh, okay, this stuck energy that's been, there for however long, it's being activated. Okay, great. Now I can look at it. And if it needs to be expressed, great, I can express it. If it needs to, if this is where the light of awareness is shining, I can shine it on there and be grateful and happy, not necessarily in the process of doing it, but at least be happy and grateful that it arose for you, that life is so beneficial that it wants nothing more than to show you the rocks that are keeping you weighed down. Instead of, oh, life is just always coming at me, and life, and that's something that I learned from A Course in Miracles. Life is never happening to us. It's happening from us, and it's happening for our benefit. That's where life is coming from. Life is happening from us, not to us. And so if we can be willing to see that and be like, okay, well, so this situation that I'm currently seeing is coming from my mind, and I am the one that is judging it, and I am the one who is reacting to it. So now I have all the power back. The power is I've now reclaimed my power and said, okay, I'm in charge here. I get to decide now what I'm going to do. And if you followed my post from yesterday, you saw that we were all about higher perception and asking, I could see peace instead of this, or how would my guides and angels see this? How would God see this? How would love see this? How would divine compassion see this? Whatever you call your higher power, how would my higher power see this? And asking that question and being willing enough in whatever small little way to step back from your story, to step back from your agenda in order for spirit to give you that perception, to help you to see it in a new and different way. And that's all that it takes. But again, we have to be willing and convicted to be like, you know what? I want to see the truth instead of this, or I want to see this situation the way that my guides would, or my angels would, or my higher power would. And we have to be convicted in that and be willing to give up our story in order to then, step forward into our power. So then we have another step that we can take, which for me is always a big one, which is forgiveness. And when it comes to forgiveness, we have four levels of forgiveness, if you will. 0, which is I forgive you, but I'm forgiving you because I'm the bigger person, because I'm so much more spiritual than you. That's not really forgiveness. That's you putting yourself above someone else. We don't want that. So then we have level 1, which is victim. Oh, I'm going to forgive you, but I'm never going to let you forget what you did to me because you are a terrible, awful person. I'm never going to let that go. Well, once again, are you really forgiving? No, you're just kind of, stirring that pot. Then we have level 2 of forgiveness, where I know a lot of us are, including myself, which is, I know you were in a bad place. I was in a bad place. So you know what? Let's just let this go. That's still not forgiveness, not true forgiveness, because true forgiveness brings us back to what we talked about in the first half of our discussion here, which is, in truth, you have done nothing wrong, which basically we can kind of put back to, in truth, whatever situation occurred could never change the truth of who I am. So I'm willing to forgive you because you couldn't change me. No matter what the event was, it cannot change the essential essence of who I am. No matter what it was, no matter how long ago it happened, no matter who it happened with, it can never change the essential essence of who you are. And so that's why forgiveness is so important. And we're not necessarily forgiving a person. We're forgiving ourselves for believing in the idea that this person or this situation is representing. And this can help us to overcome this resistance that some of us have to forgiveness, because we're not necessarily forgiving that person. We're forgiving the belief that this person and their actions are embodying. It doesn't mean that we're condoning the action, and I want to make that very clear. We're not condoning the action. What we are doing is saying the action, instead of saying that action was, all about me, or that action changed the truth of who I am, I'm forgiving that, because nothing can change the truth of who I am. I am who I am. I am what I am, and what I am is divine. What I am is light. What I am is love. What I am is joy, and nothing can hurt, harm, or take that away from me, no matter what. Okay? And so that's why we practice that forgiveness. And, for me, I went through a situation where I felt very betrayed by some people that, I held very close to my heart. People that were one of them in my mind at that time, like a best friend, a best work wife. And, we had such a beautiful relationship. I did clearings for them, cleansings for them, did a whole house blessing for them, did readings, healings, took them to the New Age store, like all these beautiful things, drove them places, picked up things for them. And then to have a situation happen and go radio silent. So I felt that betrayal. So I have been to that place where you are just like, how can I possibly forgive this person when they have betrayed me or they have deceived me or they, whatever the case may be. And for me, what I was willing to do was, because I wanted to be free. I wanted happiness. I didn't want to be in the space that I was in, because the space that I was in was not a happy place. And so this brings us to the wound where the light can enter. The wound is the place that the light can enter. Because the wound that was activated was this belief in that people are just cruel, that I could not have real friendship, that it was always based on what I could do for others. And so that wound was activated, and I got to forgive the idea that I had been carrying around since I was like 10 years old about how I couldn't really be friends with people unless I did things for them. And so as that was activated in me and I could begin to forgive that, I began to see this person and say, you know what? I'm willing to see them differently. I'm willing to see the truth instead of my dream. And so what I did was I was willing to, I basically saw this person in my mind, and I was willing to be like all the things I was thinking about them, that they were mean, that they were terrible, some other very choice words as well. And just all of this stuff and seeing that body and seeing all these words around them. And then first I said the Ho'oponopono prayer. I am sorry. What am I sorry for? I'm sorry for placing this image that I have of you on you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. Then walking through that illusion, that image, to the truth. And the truth is, they are the same light I am. They are just as bright, just as brilliant, just as beautiful, just as pure, just as eternal, just as divine. And so then I would see my light and their light kind of merge as one, because that's what we all are anyway, and just shine on that projection, like kind of from behind, and shine on that projection that of all the mean words that I was thinking about them, their body, the situation, and just kind of shine the light of truth on that. And for me, I just kind of saw that person in golden light. And for me, something that I like to do is to either see a halo around their head or they're wearing like sandals, like Jesus. That was just something that helped me to see the truth, the light. And so I did this work, 3 months of doing that work. And what do you know? I went to the store and I saw this person. And at first my heart was racing. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I was like, you know what? I've already done all the work. And I went up to the person and I kind of bumped them on the shoulder like we used to when I would see them, because we lived in a similar area, but I just hadn't seen them. And so I bumped them on the shoulder and I was like, oh, excuse me, playing around like we used to. And they were like, oh, and then I was like, hey. And then, we said, hey, and we got to talk. And at the very end of the conversation, the person asked, can I give you a hug? And I was like, of course. And so, we gave each other a big hug, and she said, I just love you. And I was like, and I love you too. And from then, after that, it was just so peaceful, because I knew that that's it. Whatever we had, we had said the I love yous, we had said, everything that needed to be said, and we went our separate ways peacefully. And I knew that I was never going to talk to that person again, not because they're a terrible person, not because Spirit was like, well, I'm going to take that person away from you, but because that person no longer served a purpose. The relationship that we had served its purpose for healing. It served it. And so that's why it was so peaceful. That's why we were able to walk away. That's why we were able to be like, I love you, and give each other that genuine hug. It wasn't like Hollywood hug, like, love you. It was a real, genuine, love you, miss you type of hug. And it was great. But again, it took that dedication and it took that time to say, you know what? I want the truth instead of this. I'm willing to forgive my belief that people are mean and cruel, that the divine created people to be less than a blessing in my life. I mean, I had so many different beliefs that I had to be willing to give over for spirit to heal for me. And I want to make that very clear. All I had to do was place my beliefs on the altar of love or on the altar of truth, which is just in my mind, just a little place that I can go to and just be like, hey, here's this belief, and I just put it on there. And I just say, Spirit, I willingly give this over to you. I ask that you take it for me and take it from me and heal it for me. My goal is peace. There you go. Done. Simple. But again, it's about getting in touch with those beliefs that we have. And a good majority of the time we don't want to because they feel so raw. And the only reason they feel raw or they feel scary or they feel really big or they feel really stuck is because why? We haven't been willing to show the light of awareness, the light of the truth of who we are onto them. And that's all we have to do. And all we have to do is be willing to acknowledge that this is what the belief is. And then be willing to give it over willingly. And yes, for me, it took 3 months because there was a lot of resistance. I wanted to forgive, but at the same time, I wanted to be right. And I will tell you, you cannot be right and happy. So what do I mean by you can't be right and happy? I couldn't be right that this person or that this belief that some people could be a blessing while other people are a curse. I couldn't be right and happy about that. I had to either choose to be, some people are going to be really great and some people aren't, or I had to choose, I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? And I had to keep being like, I want happiness. And finally I chose, and I was convicted on happiness, which then shows in the healed perception, because where is the world coming from? The world is not happening to me. It is happening from me. Okay? So this is where all of this kind of comes together. So let's kind of do a quick little review for our Wisdom Wednesday here. So first, what is a wound? A wound is simply when we identify ourselves with the ego thought system. What is the ego? The ego is not good. The ego is not bad. The ego is not powerful. All the ego is the idea of separation. So the only way that we can get wounded is when we believe that we are this small little self that we have made to cover over the truth of who we are, which is all that a shadow is. A shadow, or the shadow work, is simply where you have made this little building, this little, as the Course in Miracles would say, this little building of sand to cover the light of who you truly are. What is that light that's entering the wound? That's the light of who you truly are. It's the light of awareness. Why do we keep our wounds? Well, we keep them because we either repress them. We keep them because we venerate them. We keep them because we are saying that in some way, shape, or form that they are valuable to us, or that they are that they are us, and that we don't know who we are without them. Then we have our, I forgot where I was, second. So then we go to our third one, which is, hiding it, being like, okay, I'm willing to look at one part, maybe another part, but that's it. I'm not willing to look at the core. And then we have our last part, which is seeking advice or help or comfort, and seeking it from that place of disempowerment, which is basically to be like, okay, well, I'll hear your advice, but I'm not going to take it. And then, of course, we went into all of our different tools that we can use in order to help us with that healing. But again, you are not the healer. You are merely the recipient of the healing. And even if you do healing work, again, you are not the healer. You are merely the vessel through which that healing flows in whatever way, shape, or form. So that is our Wisdom Wednesday for this week. I want to thank you so much for joining me, so much for sharing, and I will see you all in the posts for the rest of the week. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. Whoops, and there goes the light, and I will talk to you all later. Bye for now.